For example, they refuse to learn from Christianity. They're very resistant to human rights. They're deeply concerned about liberalism. They're deeply concerned all kinds of other things, but overall, they wanted to learn from the West, and a defining characteristic of their ideology is to learn from the West. There was a moment, a very brief moment actually now in retrospect, that China became very, not only proud of China's record after the unification of China, but believed that China could come up with an alternative way. This was during the Cultural Revolution, especially early part of the Cultural Revolution in the 60s. And curiously, during the Cultural Revolution, now in retrospect, China was suffering, especially economically, suffering from a major disaster. And yet China's image in the global community was by far the best, much better than China's image today. And some of the most brilliant Western minds, such as Jean-Paul Sartre, Derrida, Michel Foucault, and many leftist thinkers of the time identified themselves with China, and they call themselves not only socialists but Maoists. And Berkeley was a great haven of Maoist thinking, and there are numerous bookstores even in Cambridge about Cultural Revolution, but that's short-lived for no more than 10 years. The other position, which is again very extreme, of course I try to exaggerate the situation, that's the Islamic world. The Islamic response to this globalization is rejection and resistance. The only country that seems very pro-West is Turkey. And yet, if you look at what happened in Turkey in the last 50 years, and in Ankara, and in Istanbul, the emergence of mosques is a phenomenon. If you visit Turkey, even in the interim of 2 or 3 years, you see new mosques emerging. So even though the government's policy is to learn from the West and to join the European Union as a goal, the populace, the people's commitment to Islam as a faith is very firm, very much like many of the other Islamic countries. The third option is coexistence. Coexistence meaning that China, learning from the West, to be sure, but in fact what happened was part of China, like the coastal area from Guangzhou all the way to Beijing, has been highly westernized. But in the middle part, China is still very much a rural society. So the coexistence of these two very different kinds of globalizing forces that exists in many societies. And of course the best, which is happening too, but very slowly, that is a fusion. This fusion, I think, if you allow fusion to happen, this is my sense, or this is also my belief. You really have to develop a dialogue. The dialogue, I will call it among core values. And fusion never happens if there's no mutual tolerance, mutual learning, mutual respect, and the celebration of differences. And all this happens when a dialogical relationship is established. And now there's a possibility. Some people argue that one of the most important bilateral relationships in the economic sphere is the Sino-American relationship. But now the relationship is in a terrible shape because the conflict in economics, in politics, and the conflict in terms of vision of the international order. The emergence of China is clearly perceived as a threat, and the imposition of American policies, including trade policy, including policy, financial policy in particular. And all these consider pressures from the outside, even threatening China's sovereignty. And so the conflict is really quite intense. One way out of the conflict is not in the political arena, but in civil society. People in the academic community, even in business, in the mass media, and in the NGOs begin to talk about the fundamental principles that made these two societies different. Of course, not just superficially. In general, all the economic, social, and political questions are absolutely critical. But if you take my sense of culture seriously, you're aware of these possibilities and then try to explore avenues of biological relationships. And of course happens. And you know how many American families have adopted Chinese girls, even around the Boston area, about 1,000 or so. And they are very sympathetic to learning the Chinese culture. And by far, you know, these games, national games like basketball, and these are very, very pervasive in China. So in sports, in human relationships, in linguistics exchange, in sharing different styles of life in an equitable way, and learning about the basic values. This is happening, and if this becomes greatly broadened, and it could turn out to be very, very useful. What is the role of the tradition we've been exploring in this kind of interchange? We know for sure that all major spiritual traditions have undergone major transformation. I mentioned this time and time again because of the emergence of the earth. So all these traditions are in the process of developing a new language, in addition to the specific language to each of the traditions. There's a Christian language, there's a Buddhist language, there's an Islamic language, there's a Hindu language. And the only way that people with very different spiritual orientations can get together for peaceful communication is through intercivilizational dialogue. You listen carefully to a radically different belief system, and hopefully by doing so your intellectual horizon will be extended, your art listening is being enhanced, your self-understanding or self-awareness will be greatly increased. I've mentioned this time and time again. Now, each of these traditions will have to develop another language in reference to the challenge of the earth. That language is global citizenship. The language is to say we are all part of it. Now, there's no world governance. United Nations is a pale comparison because basically shaped by interests of 192, 94 countries. A very encouraging development, unfortunately, has many, many problems, is the European Union. And the European Union is a very serious attempt to develop a community. But that community eventually will be a model for human integration. And of course, the European community will have to be able to enlarge itself gradually. Now, if each and every spiritual tradition, we have to develop a critical language which is globally significant. So we have a common idea. I hope that you remember this idea, but you need to put it into practice or put it into your own conceptual analysis. The global significance of local knowledge. And each one of us is rooted in a local language. That's one reason why cultural diversity is unavoidable. And that local language can turn out to be, or local knowledge can turn out to be very, very specific.